Dreamlands, analyzing H.P. Lovecraft's surreal settings historically and archetypally. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born on August 20th, 1890, to Sarah Susan Phillips Lovecraft and Winfield Scott Lovecraft. At the age of 3, Howard's father was institutionalized and died 5 years later. After his father's death, Howard was raised by his mother, 2 aunts, and grandfather, the well-to-do industrialist Whipple Van Buren Phillips. Howard fell in love with his grandfather's immense library and was reading by the age of 5. By the next year, he was immersed in ancient mythology and actually practicing worship. Lovecraft's grandfather died when he was 13, leaving his family with limited finances. The family was suddenly thrust into extreme poverty. This drastic shift in socioeconomic placement, coupled with the loss of Lovecraft's only strong male role model, would have a permanent impact on his life to come. The other main highlights of Lovecraft's life are a short-lived marriage that ended when his wife was institutionalized, and his run as the president of the National Amateur Press Association. Throughout his life, Lovecraft suffered vivid nightmares, night terrors, an undiagnosed genetic disorder, and mild Asperger's. He did not have anything in his favor, except when he was young and rich, and now he's not. Lovecraft's work focused on a variety of philosophical and scientific topics that all came to fruition through his intense vocabulary and unique language. Best known for his Cthulhu mythos, a pantheon of cosmic monstrosities that exist far beyond man's comprehension, Lovecraft also created a world that was a great catharsis for his ever-present nightmares. Lovecraft suffered horrible visions in his sleep, and these would become the most memorable creations of his. His alien landscapes and indescribable monsters crept from his pen and into the minds of his readers. One of his greatest creations is the Dreamland, a world that's only accessible by those who can dream, which we'll cover in just a moment. It's a land filled with beauty and danger. And the Dream Cycle books that take place in the Dreamlands are some of Lovecraft's most autobiographical work. The main goal of this presentation is to identify Egyptian mythological themes in the Dreamlands and to find Jungian archetypes in Lovecraft's work, The Dream Quest of Unknown Cadet. The afterlife believed in by the ancient Egyptians was one of struggle and adventure. Ancient Egyptians believed that when one was laid to rest physically, the Ba, or the Egyptian term for soul, rose from the body, and the tomb became a portal to Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Duat's only best described as a cavernous labyrinth filled with loathsome monstrosities. These monstrosities were not only horrifying in appearance, but moniker. Examples of their repulsive names are He Who Lives on Snakes and He Who Dances in Blood. Few descriptions exist of these things, but when they are described, they're typically ferocious monstrosities like animal heads rested on people bodies, or these bizarre amalgams of a lot of crazy beasts. And they always have these gigantic knives. The only way one could dissuade these supernatural prowlers was by subduing them with a spell from the Egyptian grimoire and book to right living, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It was a list of how to get into Duat and survive, and it had 17 specific spells. It's really interesting. The reason there's food carved on the walls of tombs is because it was believed that when you were dead, you would still want to eat your favorite foods. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead would give you a spell to bring this etching to life. And so you could animate this drawing of food and now eat. Anyway, once you dissuaded one of these vile creatures, all of them would stop and they'd leave you alone and they'd become very docile. Once you journeyed through Duat, the deceased would enter the Hall of Two Truths. This is a room full of 42 judges and gods. And after you entered here, you were led by Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead, who would weigh your heart, or Eve, against a feather of his wife, Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of balance and order. Now, if your heart was heavy, it was because you committed bad deeds, and you would raise the feather of Ma'at. Now, if you were a righteous person, you lived a good life, your heart would be light, and thus Ma'at's feather would raise. Now, if you tip the scale, your heart was fed to Amet, the great devourer of the dead, or, as his name translates to, the great swallower. Anyway, and your journey's done. You are dead forever, and there's nothing else. However, if you manage to raise the feather, you get to enter the Field of Rushes. The Field of Rushes is a perfect version of Egypt. And you get to live out the vocation you had during life, forever. Except now, you have magic powers, and you don't get sick or die.